Tonight on Dreadful Visions, airports never truly sleep. Even after the final departures, thousands of travelers remain stranded by delays, missed connections, and overnight layovers. Empty terminals, silent jet bridges, and late-night announcements become the backdrop for moments most passengers never expect. The people wearing uniforms appear trustworthy. Every sign points you in the right direction, and every gate feels safe. Until one wrong decision sends you somewhere you were never supposed to be. These are 5 unsettling airport horror stories inspired by real fears that can turn an ordinary journey into a nightmare. Story 1. The airport employee told me to follow him. 27-year-old Daniel Brooks had already accepted that he wasn't getting home that night. A violent thunderstorm sweeping across Texas had grounded dozens of flights at Dallas Fort Worth International Airport, leaving thousands of frustrated passengers scattered throughout the terminals. Every charging station was occupied, every restaurant had closed hours earlier, and the customer service line stretched so far that airport staff stopped giving estimated wait times. Daniel's connecting flight to Seattle had originally been scheduled for 9:40 p.m. By midnight, it had been canceled. The airline offered him a replacement flight the following morning at 8:15 a.m., meaning he had nearly 8 hours to kill inside one of the busiest airports in America. Most passengers tried sleeping across rows of chairs near their gates. Daniel couldn't. Bright lights, constant announcements, and crying children made sleep impossible. Around 2:15 a.m., he decided to walk around the terminal instead. The crowds had finally begun to disappear. Cleaning crews slowly pushed floor polishers across the concourse, while airport security officers patrolled in pairs. Most shops sat behind closed metal shutters, leaving long stretches of the terminal strangely quiet compared to the chaos only a few hours earlier. Daniel eventually reached gate D37, completely deserted. He sat beside the large windows overlooking the rain-soaked runway and began scrolling through his phone. That's when someone spoke behind him. Long night. Daniel looked up. A man wearing a reflective airport operations jacket stood a few feet away holding a clipboard. His uniform looked genuine. Airport logo, radio clipped to his shoulder, security badge hanging around his neck. Everything appeared completely normal. Daniel smiled tiredly. Flight got canceled. The employee nodded. Happening all over tonight. He glanced toward Daniel's boarding pass still resting on the seat beside him. Seattle? Yeah, you're actually in luck. Daniel frowned. The employee explained that another delayed aircraft heading to Seattle had just arrived from Denver. Several empty seats had unexpectedly become available after connecting passengers missed the flight. They're boarding from a temporary gate. You need to get there pretty quickly. Daniel immediately stood up. Seriously? The employee smiled. Follow me. Daniel grabbed his backpack and suitcase without thinking twice. The man walked confidently through the nearly empty terminal. He never looked back, never hesitated. He moved exactly like someone who worked there every day. They passed several darkened restaurants before leaving the main concourse entirely. Soon they entered a quieter corridor Daniel hadn't noticed earlier. Unlike the public terminal, this hallway had plain white walls, exposed ceiling pipes, and fluorescent lights instead of decorative lighting. No passengers, no shops, no airline staff, just long maintenance corridors stretching in different directions. Daniel slowed slightly. The employee kept walking. Almost there. A few moments later they reached a heavy gray security door. The employee swiped his ID badge. The door unlocked with a loud electronic click. Daniel instinctively stopped. Beyond the doorway, there wasn't another boarding area. There wasn't a gate. There wasn't even a waiting lounge. Only a narrow industrial hallway leading deeper into the airport's restricted maintenance section. Daniel looked around. Something suddenly felt wrong. There were no signs, no departure screens, no windows, no other people. Just silence. The employee noticed Daniel hadn't followed. He turned slowly. His smile hadn't changed. You coming? Daniel glanced back toward the main terminal. It was no longer visible, only the long empty corridor behind him. Then he noticed something that made his stomach tighten. The employee's security badge was turned backwards. Daniel's eyes remained fixed on the backwards security badge. It was such a small detail. Yet suddenly, everything else felt wrong too. The reflective jacket looked genuine. The clipboard looked genuine. Even the airport radio clipped to the man's shoulder seemed authentic. But why would someone working inside one of the busiest airports in America wear their identification backwards? The employee tilted his head slightly. "You don't want to miss your flight." Daniel forced a smile. "Actually, I think I left my charger back at the gate. I'll be right back." The employee didn't move. "No problem. I'll wait." That answer immediately confirmed Daniel's instincts. If there really were passengers boarding another flight, no airport employee would stand around waiting for one person to retrieve a phone charger. Daniel slowly backed away. As soon as he rounded the nearest corner, he grabbed his suitcase and ran. Within seconds, he was back inside the public terminal surrounded by bright lights, security cameras, and other travelers. He didn't stop until he reached an information desk where a uniformed airport police officer happened to be speaking with another employee. Daniel explained everything. The officer immediately asked one question. "Which gate did he say you were flying from?" Daniel shook his head. "He never actually said. He just told me to follow him." The officer's expression changed instantly. He radioed several other officers before asking Daniel to point out exactly where the encounter had happened. They walked back toward the maintenance corridor together. The heavy gray security door was still there, locked. The officer scanned his access card. Nothing. The reader flashed red. He frowned. "This door hasn't been active in months." Daniel stared at it. But he opened it. The officer called airport operations. Within minutes, a supervisor arrived carrying a master key. The door opened. The industrial hallway beyond was exactly as Daniel remembered. Empty. Silent. Police searched the restricted area for nearly an hour. No airport employee matching Daniel's description was found. Then one officer discovered something unusual. Near an unused maintenance workshop sat an old folding chair. Beside it, several empty water bottles, fast food wrappers, blankets, and a backpack containing stolen airport uniforms from different departments. Whoever had been there had left only minutes earlier. Investigators later discovered the truth. Several months before, a former airport contractor had secretly copied old maintenance keys before his employment ended. Rather than leaving the airport, he had continued entering restricted areas through service tunnels connected to the older parts of the terminal. He collected discarded uniforms, reflective jackets, radios that no longer worked, and expired employee badges. Late at night, when exhausted travelers became separated from the crowds, he approached people whose flights had been canceled. Most were too tired to question someone who looked official. Detectives believed he convinced several victims to follow him into restricted areas before stealing their luggage, wallets, and electronics. Some victims were too embarrassed to report what had happened, believing they had simply been tricked by a fake employee. Others assumed they had been robbed somewhere else inside the airport. Daniel's report finally connected the pattern. Police reviewed weeks of CCTV footage. Sure enough, they found the man, always approaching stranded passengers after midnight, always choosing people traveling alone, always disappearing before reaching the maintenance corridors where public cameras ended. 3 weeks later, officers arrested him after another traveler became suspicious and secretly called airport police while pretending to follow his instructions. Inside the suspect's rented storage unit, detectives recovered dozens of stolen passports, wallets, laptops, airline vouchers, and airport uniforms collected over several years. Daniel eventually flew home the following morning. His replacement flight was completely uneventful. But before boarding, he noticed something he'd never paid attention to before. Every genuine airport employee wore their identification facing outward. Every single one. Now, whenever Daniel flies anywhere in the world, he never follows someone simply because they're wearing a uniform. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person in an airport Looks exactly like they belong there. Story 2. The last airport shuttle wasn't going to my hotel. 32-year-old Emily Carter landed at Denver International Airport just after 1:30 a.m. after her original flight from Boston had been delayed by almost 5 hours. She was exhausted. The business conference she had traveled across the country to attend began at 9 the following morning, and after spending nearly an entire day inside airports, all she wanted was a shower and a few hours of sleep. Her company had already booked a room at an airport hotel only a few miles away. The confirmation email explained that a complimentary shuttle operated every 30 minutes throughout the night. After collecting her suitcase from baggage claim, Emily followed the signs marked hotel shuttles toward the transportation level outside the terminal. The air was cold. Only a handful of travelers remained outside, each waiting quietly beneath the bright overhead lights. Within a few minutes, several hotel shuttle buses arrived one after another. Passengers climbed aboard until the area became almost empty. Emily checked the confirmation email again. Her hotel's shuttle hadn't arrived yet. 5 minutes later, a white shuttle bus slowly pulled into the pickup lane. The hotel's name was printed clearly along both sides. Perfect. The doors folded open. The driver smiled. Airport hotel? Emily nodded. That's me. She loaded her suitcase into the luggage compartment before climbing aboard. Only 3 other passengers sat inside, a young couple near the front, and an older man sitting alone near the back. The bus pulled away from the terminal. For the first few minutes, everything seemed completely normal. The driver followed the airport exit roads exactly as expected. The young couple were dropped off first. The hotel looked legitimate. Large entrance, bright reception, employees waiting inside. Emily relaxed. 10 minutes later, the older man requested the next stop. Again, the driver pulled into another hotel entrance. The passenger thanked him before walking inside. Now, Emily was alone. She looked down at her phone. The map showed they should have reached her hotel already. Instead, the shuttle continued driving. She glanced toward the driver. "Excuse me, I think we passed my hotel." The driver didn't look back. "We're taking a different route tonight." "Roadworks." Emily checked her phone again. There weren't any road closures. The shuttle left the main airport roads entirely. Soon they were driving through dark industrial streets lined with warehouses and distribution centers. No hotels, no traffic, no pedestrians, only empty roads disappearing into the darkness. Emily's stomach tightened. Then she noticed something she'd completely overlooked when boarding. There wasn't a company identification card displayed beside the driver's seat. Every airport shuttle she'd ever used had one. This bus didn't. Emily quietly opened the airline confirmation email again. The hotel's address was only 4 miles from the airport. According to the navigation app on her phone, she was now almost 8 miles away, in the opposite direction. She leaned forward. "I'm sorry. I think you've taken a wrong turn." The driver kept his eyes on the road. "It's a quicker route this time of night." His answer sounded rehearsed, calm, confident, but it didn't explain why they were driving deeper into an industrial district where every building looked closed for the night. Emily glanced toward the luggage compartment through the small rear window. Her suitcase was still there. She considered asking the driver to stop immediately. Instead, she quietly opened the emergency text feature on her phone. Her signal was weak, but still active. She sent a message to her colleague. "Wrong shuttle. Not at hotel. Sharing my location now." The location pin took several seconds to upload. Then, it finally sent. Almost immediately, her colleague replied, "That's not your hotel. Call 911. Emily pressed the emergency call button. The dispatcher answered after 2 rings. Keeping her voice as steady as possible, she quietly explained that she believed she was on the wrong airport shuttle. The dispatcher asked her to keep the phone hidden. "Can you describe the vehicle?" "White shuttle. Hotel name on the side. Only me and the driver now." The dispatcher immediately contacted airport police. Meanwhile, Emily continued watching the road. The shuttle eventually turned into what looked like an abandoned commercial parking lot surrounded by empty warehouse buildings. The driver slowed, then stopped. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, the driver stood up. "I'll just check something outside." He stepped off the bus and disappeared around the rear of the vehicle. Emily didn't wait. She rushed to the driver's seat. The entrance doors were still open. She jumped out carrying only her backpack. Her suitcase remained underneath the bus. She sprinted toward the main road as fast as she could. Less than a minute later, flashing blue lights appeared at the entrance to the industrial estate. The driver attempted to leave in the shuttle, but was blocked by two airport police vehicles entering from opposite directions. He was arrested at the scene. The investigation that followed uncovered something far more organized than anyone expected. The shuttle itself had been purchased months earlier from a transport company after being retired from service. The suspect had professionally repainted it using the branding of a legitimate airport hotel. He copied the hotel's logo, color scheme, and even installed fake route signs inside the vehicle. Late-night travelers, especially those arriving after delays, rarely questioned whether the shuttle was genuine. Most were too tired to notice the subtle differences. Detectives eventually linked him to several theft reports made over the previous year. Passengers had described waking up in unfamiliar areas after accepting rides they believed were official hotel transportation. Many had lost luggage, passports, laptops, and credit cards. Because they couldn't always remember exactly where they had boarded, investigators initially believed the thefts were unrelated. Emily's quick decision to share her location changed everything. Airport CCTV showed the fake shuttle waiting just outside the official pickup area before genuine hotel buses arrived. The suspect deliberately targeted passengers left standing alone after the legitimate shuttles had already departed. Inside a nearby storage garage rented under a false name, police recovered dozens of stolen suitcases, passports, laptops, hotel reservation documents, and counterfeit shuttle company decals ready to be applied to other vehicles. Emily never recovered her suitcase, but compared to what investigators believed could have happened, she considered herself incredibly lucky. Now, whenever she lands in a new city, she checks one thing before stepping onto any airport shuttle. Not the logo, not the color, not even the driver's uniform. She checks the vehicle number listed in her hotel's confirmation email. Because anyone can copy a logo, but very few people think to copy the number. Story 3. My suitcase came back 3 days later. 30-year-old Nathan Collins wasn't worried when his suitcase failed to appear on the baggage carousel. It happened often enough that airlines had an entire process built around it. After landing at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport just before midnight, Nathan waited beside Carousel 8 while the last few bags circled endlessly. His suitcase never arrived. An airline employee apologized and explained that his luggage had likely been left behind during the connection in Charlotte. It wasn't unusual. Nathan filled out a missing baggage report before heading to his hotel with only the backpack he'd carried onto the plane. The airline promised his suitcase would be delivered as soon as it arrived. 3 days later, it did. A courier van pulled into the hotel parking lot shortly after breakfast. The driver unloaded Nathan's black hardshell suitcase, asked him to sign an electronic tablet, and drove away. Everything appeared normal. The airline baggage tag was still attached. The TSA inspection seal remained intact. Nothing looked disturbed. Nathan rolled the suitcase into his room and unzipped it. At first glance, everything was exactly where he'd packed it. His clothes, his shoes, his toiletries, his laptop charger. Nothing appeared to be missing. Still, something felt strange. The contents looked too neat. Nathan had packed the suitcase himself in a hurry before leaving home. He distinctly remembered stuffing clothes inside, without folding them properly. Now every shirt was neatly stacked. His charging cables were wrapped perfectly. Even the spare shoes had been placed heel to heel. He laughed to himself. Maybe airport security had simply repacked everything more carefully after an inspection. He shrugged it off. Later that afternoon, while unpacking the final compartment, he noticed something else. One of the inside mesh pockets had been zipped closed. He never used that pocket. Curious, he opened it. Inside sat a brand new black luggage tracker, still switched on. Nathan frowned. He definitely hadn't bought one. Thinking it had somehow been left behind by baggage handlers, he removed the battery and tossed it into the hotel trash. That evening, he mentioned the strange discovery during dinner with a colleague. The colleague immediately asked a simple question. "Did you check the serial number on the suitcase?" Nathan looked confused. "Why would I?" "Because. Are you sure it's actually yours?" Nathan laughed. "Of course it is. Same brand. Same scratches. Same baggage tag." His colleague wasn't convinced. The following morning, Nathan looked more closely. Tiny marks he remembered seeing near one wheel were gone. The zipper pull he'd accidentally bent months earlier was perfectly straight. Then he spotted something that made his stomach tighten. Printed inside the suitcase lining was a small manufacturing label. The production date showed the suitcase had been made just 6 months earlier. Nathan had owned his for nearly 4 years. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to give him a suitcase that looked almost identical to his own. Nathan stared at the manufacturing label for several seconds. There had to be a simple explanation. Maybe the airline had accidentally replaced his damaged suitcase with a newer model. But if that were true, why hadn't anyone told him? He immediately called the airline's baggage service department. After giving the reference number from his lost luggage report, the representative placed him on hold while checking the system. When she returned, her voice sounded confused. "Sir, according to our records, your original suitcase was successfully delivered to you yesterday morning." Nathan frowned. "No, it arrived today." The representative insisted the courier had already marked the delivery as completed nearly 24 hours earlier. Even stranger, the electronic signature on the courier's handheld device wasn't Nathan's. Someone else had signed for it. The airline immediately opened an internal investigation. That afternoon, airport security requested Nathan bring the suitcase back for inspection. Investigators photographed every inch of it before comparing the serial number with purchase records Nathan had emailed from several years earlier. The numbers didn't match. It wasn't his suitcase. It was an almost perfect duplicate. Detectives then reviewed CCTV footage from the baggage handling area. 3 days earlier, shortly after Nathan's suitcase had been reported missing, one particular camera captured something unusual. A baggage handler wearing a reflective vest quietly removed one black suitcase from a conveyor before placing an almost identical case onto the belt in its place. The exchange took less than 15 seconds. No one nearby appeared to notice. Police identified the employee within hours. He wasn't an airline worker. He was a temporary contractor hired through an outside baggage handling company. By the time officers arrived at the address listed on his employment records, he had disappeared. The investigation uncovered an organized theft operation that had gone unnoticed for months. The suspects specifically targeted common suitcase brands and replaced them with nearly identical secondhand cases purchased online. Inside each replacement suitcase, they secretly placed GPS luggage trackers. Once the owner returned home, the trackers revealed residential addresses. The criminals then used stolen boarding passes, travel itineraries, and home addresses recovered from the original luggage to identify houses likely sitting empty while families remained overseas. Police believe the stolen suitcases were searched for passports, credit cards, spare keys, and anything that could help commit burglaries after the victims returned home. Nathan's quick report exposed a pattern stretching across multiple airports in 3 different states. Investigators eventually recovered more than 60 stolen suitcases from a rented warehouse outside Atlanta. Many had never been reported because their owners believed they had simply received their own luggage back. Several weeks later, police arrested 3 members of the group after another traveler discovered a hidden tracker almost identical to the one Nathan had found. His original suitcase was eventually recovered. Nothing valuable had been stolen. The thieves had only photographed documents inside before repacking everything exactly as they found it. Almost. There was one thing they couldn't recreate: the bent zipper pull. Nathan still travels regularly for work. His suitcase has plenty of new scratches now, but every time he collects it from baggage claim, he checks one small detail before leaving the airport. Not the baggage tag, not the color, not even the lock. He checks the bent zipper. Because sometimes, the easiest way to steal someone's life is to give them back something they believe is already theirs. Story 4. Someone was sleeping inside the airport. For nearly 4 years, Marcus Hill had worked the overnight cleaning shift at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Most travelers only saw airports during the busiest parts of the day. Marcus saw what they became after midnight. The crowds disappeared. Departure boards stopped changing as often. Entire terminals became silent except for floor scrubbers, distant announcements, and the occasional luggage cart echoing through empty corridors. His job was simple. Start at one end of Terminal 3. Clean each gate one by one until sunrise. Most nights were completely uneventful, until airport security called him about Gate B18. Just after 2:40 a.m., an officer stopped Marcus while he was emptying trash bins. "Have you been opening Gate B18 tonight?" Marcus looked confused. "No." "Why?" The officer explained that the electronic security logs showed the emergency exit beside Gate B18 opening almost every night around the same time. The problem: the CCTV cameras never showed anyone using it. Management assumed the sensor was faulty. Maintenance replaced it twice. The alerts continued. Marcus didn't think much about it until 3 nights later. While polishing the floor outside Gate B18, he heard something behind him. Click. He turned around immediately. The emergency exit door had opened by itself. Only a few inches. Nobody walked through. After several seconds, it slowly closed again. Marcus approached carefully. The alarm hadn't sounded. The door appeared perfectly normal. He pulled it open. Behind it was a narrow concrete service corridor used mainly by maintenance workers during construction projects years earlier. Most airport employees didn't even know it existed. Marcus shined his flashlight down the passage. Nothing. Just exposed pipes, electrical panels, and a long corridor disappearing into darkness. He closed the door and continued working. The following night, it happened again. 2:43 a.m. Click. The door opened. This time, Marcus walked inside. The corridor stretched almost 200 feet before splitting into several smaller passages leading beneath different sections of the terminal. Everything looked abandoned. Dust covered the floor. Old construction signs leaned against the walls. Unused airport seating remained stacked in one corner beneath plastic sheets. Then Marcus noticed something unusual. Fresh footprints. Not dusty ones. Fresh ones. They continued deeper underground. He followed them slowly until the corridor ended at an old storage room. The heavy steel door stood slightly open. Inside, someone had been living there. A folding bed, bottled water, canned food, portable phone chargers, a battery-powered lantern, several airport employee uniforms hanging neatly on hooks. Everything looked surprisingly organized. Marcus quietly backed away. Then, he heard footsteps echoing somewhere deeper inside the service tunnels. Marcus immediately switched off his flashlight. The tunnel became almost completely dark. Only the faint green glow of emergency exit signs illuminated sections of the concrete passage ahead. The footsteps continued. Slow, steady, getting closer. Marcus quietly stepped behind a stack of old airport seating still wrapped in plastic. The footsteps stopped outside the storage room. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then someone gently pushed the steel door fully open. A man wearing a reflective airport maintenance jacket stepped inside, carrying a small flashlight. His face remained hidden beneath a dark baseball cap. He walked directly toward the folding bed before placing a backpack on the floor. Marcus watched silently from behind the stacked chairs. The man never looked around. He simply unpacked bottled water, food, and a fresh airport employee uniform before hanging the jacket beside the others. Only then did Marcus notice something disturbing. There weren't just 1 or 2 uniforms. There were at least 8. Different colors, different airport departments, cleaning crews, maintenance, ground operations, baggage handling, security contractors. The man had collected uniforms from almost every part of the airport. Marcus slowly reached for his phone. He sent one silent text message to airport security. Restricted tunnel. Someone living here. Need police. He shared his location, then waited. The response came almost immediately. Stay where you are. Officers are coming. Several minutes later, the distant sound of running footsteps echoed through the tunnel. The man heard them too. He froze. Without hesitation, he grabbed his backpack and sprinted through another doorway at the rear of the storage room. By the time airport police entered moments later, he was gone. Officers searched the underground maintenance tunnels for over 2 hours. The suspect disappeared into a maze of forgotten construction corridors beneath the terminal. Although they failed to catch him that night, the storage room revealed far more than anyone expected. Investigators recovered airport maps marked with employee patrol routes, shift schedules, delivery times, emergency exit locations, and handwritten notes identifying which gates remained empty during overnight hours. There were also dozens of stolen employee ID holders. Most no longer contained identification cards. Only the plastic sleeves remained. The FBI later joined the investigation after detectives connected similar incidents at 2 other major airports. The suspect was believed to be a former construction subcontractor who had worked on airport expansions years earlier. He secretly copied maintenance keys before leaving the project and continued accessing restricted service tunnels that many current employees didn't even know existed. Using stolen uniforms, he blended into airport operations whenever he needed food, supplies, or access to different parts of the terminal. Passengers occasionally remembered seeing someone matching his description pushing cleaning carts or carrying maintenance equipment. Nobody questioned him. He looked exactly like everyone else. 3 months later, officers finally arrested the suspect after an airport mechanic noticed a man entering a restricted electrical room using an outdated access key. Inside another hidden maintenance space, investigators recovered stolen electronics, employee uniforms, airport radios, and notebooks documenting overnight activity dating back almost 4 years. Marcus returned to work after the investigation ended. The airport sealed every abandoned service tunnel they could locate and installed motion sensors throughout the restricted corridors. Gate B18 never triggered another unexplained alert. But Marcus never forgot one small detail. During the investigation, police confirmed the suspect had been secretly living beneath one of the busiest airports in America for years. Thousands of passengers walked overhead every single day, completely unaware that someone was sleeping just a few feet below them. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment telling me which story unsettled you the most, and subscribe to Dreadful Visions for more realistic horror stories inspired by the everyday places we trust. New long-form stories are uploaded every other day, and the next ordinary location could become the setting for your next sleepless night. Until next time, stay aware of your surroundings, trust your instincts, and remember that not every restricted door is locked for your protection. Sleep well tonight, if you can. Story 5. They announced my flight had been canceled. 28-year-old Ryan Foster was already halfway to his departure gate when he heard the announcement. Attention passengers traveling on Flight 482 to Los Angeles. Due to unforeseen operational issues, this flight has now been canceled. Ryan stopped walking. That didn't make sense. Only 10 minutes earlier, the departure board had shown his flight as boarding on time. Around him, several other passengers looked equally confused. Some immediately pulled out their phones. Others turned around and started walking back toward the airline service desk. Ryan checked the airline's app. No notification. The flight still showed on time. Assuming the app simply hadn't updated yet, he joined the growing crowd heading toward customer service. The line was already enormous. Dozens of frustrated passengers waited while airline employees hurried between computer terminals trying to rebook flights. After nearly 20 minutes, Ryan finally reached the desk. The airline employee frowned at her screen. "Canceled? Who told you that?" "The announcement." She looked genuinely confused. "Sir, your flight is boarding right now." Ryan felt his stomach drop. "What?" She turned her monitor toward him. "Flight 482. Gate A19. Final boarding." Ryan grabbed his backpack and ran. When he reached the gate less than 2 minutes later, passengers were still walking onto the aircraft. The gate agent scanned his boarding pass without any issue. Everything appeared completely normal. As Ryan found his seat, he noticed several other passengers arriving out of breath. One man sitting across the aisle laughed. "Did you hear that fake announcement too?" Ryan nodded. "You heard it as well?" The man explained that he'd almost missed the flight after hearing someone announce the cancellation over what sounded exactly like the airport's public address system. Several passengers nearby admitted they had heard the same message. None of them understood what had happened. After landing safely in Los Angeles, Ryan assumed it had been some bizarre technical fault. Until 3 weeks later, a news article appeared online. Police had arrested a man inside another major airport after he was caught using unauthorized radio equipment capable of broadcasting directly through public address speakers in certain sections of the terminal. Investigators believed he had interrupted dozens of genuine announcements over several months. Ryan immediately contacted the detective listed in the article. After describing what had happened in Dallas, the detective became very interested. Ryan wasn't the first person to report hearing a fake cancellation announcement. He wasn't even the 10th. According to investigators, passengers on several domestic flights had experienced nearly identical incidents. Always late at night, always near gates preparing for final boarding, always involving flights that were completely full. The detective asked Ryan one final question. "When you walked back toward customer service, did anyone approach you?" Ryan thought for a moment. "Actually, yeah. Someone wearing an airport jacket asked if I needed help finding the rebooking line." He pointed toward another corridor. Ryan hadn't followed him. The customer service signs had been clearly visible, so he'd ignored the offer and continued walking on his own. The detective sighed. "That's exactly what we expected." Ryan immediately arranged a phone call with the detective leading the investigation. Over the following week, officers pieced together a pattern that stretched across multiple airports in 3 different states. The fake announcements were never random. The suspect carefully selected flights that were almost fully boarded, knowing that a handful of passengers would panic and leave the gate without questioning what they'd heard. Then, as those confused passengers searched for customer service, another member of the group approached them wearing convincing airport uniforms. Rather than stealing from people immediately, they simply redirected them. Some victims were led toward quiet sections of the terminal, supposedly containing temporary rebooking desks. Others were directed outside to fake hotel shuttle pickup points. Several reported having wallets, passports, laptops, and luggage stolen after being separated from the crowds. One traveler later admitted he had followed a fake airline representative through 2 restricted corridors before realizing something wasn't right. Fortunately, he managed to escape. Ryan's decision to ignore the helpful stranger had probably saved him from becoming another victim. Airport police reviewed security footage from the night Ryan traveled. Sure enough, cameras captured a man standing near gate A19 carrying a portable radio transmitter hidden inside an ordinary backpack. Seconds before the false cancellation announcement played, he quietly spoke into a handheld microphone. Immediately afterward, another man wearing a reflective airport operations jacket approached confused passengers leaving the gate. The 2 suspects never spoke to each other. They didn't need to. Everything had been carefully rehearsed. Investigators eventually discovered the group had been operating for almost a year. Their equipment wasn't sophisticated enough to control the entire airport announcement system. Instead, they exploited older speaker circuits covering only certain gate areas. Passengers standing nearby heard the fake announcements clearly. People elsewhere in the terminal heard nothing at all. That explained why airline employees remained completely unaware while dozens of travelers walked away from active boarding gates. 3 months later, federal agents arrested 4 people during a coordinated operation at 2 major airports. Inside several storage units, they recovered counterfeit airport uniforms, portable radio transmitters, fake airline identification cards, stolen passports, boarding passes, laptops, and thousands of dollars worth of luggage taken from travelers across the country. Airport authorities quietly upgraded aging public address equipment after the investigation concluded. Most passengers never learned why. Today, Ryan still flies several times each year for work. Whenever he hears an unexpected announcement, he doesn't immediately believe it. He checks the departure board. He checks the airline's app. And if something still doesn't seem right, he walks directly to the gate agent instead of following anyone else. Because airports are built on one simple idea. People trust instructions without questioning who gave them. And sometimes, the most dangerous announcement you'll ever hear was never made by the airport at all. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, don't forget to like the video. Leave a comment telling me which airport story unsettled you the most, and subscribe to Dreadful Visions for more realistic horror stories inspired by the everyday places we all think are safe. New long-form stories are uploaded every other day, and there are plenty more ordinary locations hiding extraordinary nightmares. Until next time, stay alert, trust your instincts, and remember that a uniform, an announcement, or an official-looking smile doesn't always mean someone belongs there. Sleep well tonight, if you can.